they put up the graphic. Kyle's like 1 in 32, something like that, when trailing by more than 8 points in the fourth quarter. Is the worst. He's the only coach that hasn't had a win. I think that's actively coaching that hasn't had a win in that scenario. Why is that?
It's
Well,
got.
go ahead.
I mean, it's got to be his philosophy, right? Like Kyle has an explosive scheme that, if executed properly, because that's what it comes down to with Kyle Shanahan, the execution, basically. Because he feels like every play call that he calls is going to be for 7 points, like six and then the extra point. Like every time they step onto the football field. And when you go back and watch the film, you'd be like, dang, if this person made that block, or if this happened, it probably could have gone. We just talked about on that second interception, like if the ball wasn't tipped, it was getting into one of the most explosive players in the NFL's hands, and he just had to beat a one-on-one. That's Kyle Shanahan. I feel like he thinks his team is just going to come out offensively and like just take a crazy lead. And it is what it is. And kind of when he plays with the lead, they don't lose. When he doesn't have a lead, though, I don't think he's that type of play caller that can kind of like figure it out. Maybe his stuff needs to be simplified when we're losing just a little bit. Like simplify it. Just have a check down. How about in front of Brock Purdy opposed to the side of Brock Purdy? So he could just float it right there. Just little things to kind of get some juju and get back into a game. I don't know why that stat is like really that's a bad stat. It's terrible, but I think his mindset is that we're not going to be trailing in games. So,
Yeah, that's fair, but sometimes things go the wrong way. And so I went back after the 3-game loss and I charted every single play call in the fourth quarter or overtime when it was within 8 points. Okay, so one possession games in the fourth quarter, whether the 49ers were up or down. And so for a 2-year stretch, Kyle Shanahan had an 85% pass call rate when it was a one possession game in the fourth quarter and overtime. That's simple to me. Like the panic mode that he gets in pressure situations, and you see it on the sideline. And I love Kyle. He's my number one head coach. If I could rebuild a team start to scratch, Kyle's my number one pick. But this is the flaw. Now you almost broke the record for most consecutive games by winning, 12 points or more with 6 consecutive games. That was awesome. But at some point you got to win from behind. And even whenever I think we saw this in the Bears game when we were up 3 points in the fourth quarter, he still kept passing. Like, you got to be able to rely on the run. It is consistent. It helps your defense. It calms everybody down. Play the odds. It's how you build this team. It's how you built this team. So rely on the run. 85% passes in one possession games in the fourth quarter overtime. That's crazy. Now that's not updated since the 3-game loss streak, but I'm not sure there were a lot of one possession games before this Ravens game.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not the way this team is built. When you look at the offensive line, what have they always weighted towards? And I always point to Mike McGlinchey. Okay, he is the only first round investment in their offensive line. And what do we always see for Mike McGlinchey? What do we always say about Mike McGlinchey?
run
He's a
Run
blocking,
block.
fantastic run blocker.
run blocker.
He is a below average at best pass blocker. I think that is an encapsulation of how Kyle Shanahan builds his offensive line. And so when you are in a situation where your offensive line has to drop back 15 times in a row, or 10 times in a row, or even 5 times in a row, that is not looking good for your quarterback. It's just not, because these guys are not good. They don't practice it. They don't rep it. They weren't drafted because of it as guys who can drop back. And so you always see this, always, 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 like you say, it becomes so predictable. You're dropping back, and it's like, you see the quarterbacks, every quarterback we've had, they're almost going into panic mode because within 2.5 seconds there's a guy in their lap, and it becomes so hard to execute, and it becomes so frustrating, and then it's putting your defense, and it snowballs, and it does all these things. And that's why, again, Kyle Shanahan, it's great when you're running ahead, but it's so hard, especially. I think that's why it's so weighted. But I also want to bring this up. Mike Sando here on Twitter gave us some really good perspective on this. I'm gonna zoom in on this so we can see it a little bit better. Regarding the 0-38 down 8+ in the fourth quarter, all teams win 7% of the time. That's the winning percentage. The best in the league is Kansas City. Not surprising. They're built to throw the ball. So when they're in a throw the ball situation, they can do better than everybody else. And they also have that, Mahomes kid. I hear he's going to be pretty good. And Green Bay was after that, and they had that Rodgers kid for a while. He was pretty good. When you look at Seattle, is then next in there. They're 1-38. Carolina 1-58. Indiana 1-36. And when we talk about, he's the only one without a win. Okay, we can say that, but there's a lot of teams here that only have one win. Baltimore 2-22. Same sort of, they're built very similarly to the 49ers. Dallas 2-37. So there you go, Timothy. Dak is 2-37, went down 8 points. And so, I think there's also a perspective there of that very few teams, it's really hard to win when you're in that situation, especially with the kind of parity that's in the league. And then when you add that on top of a team that is built to run the ball, now that's why you're 0-37, 0-38 now. Trailing in the fourth quarter.
My thing is, I wish there was just one coach that could have like 3 like buttons a game where it's just like one coach just sitting up there in the booth, and whenever he pushes the button, Kyle has to call a run play. Just 3 times. Just 3 times. And whatever happens, Kyle gets cut off. It's a run play, whatever Brock wants. And that's just what we do. Like, just
kind of like the golden tickets
things.
with America's Got Talent. They get one per season. This is the one. All right, here I'm vetoing Kyle. It's going to be a run play.
Run play 3 times.
Give it to Jane from payroll or Joan from payroll. I want Joan from payroll.
Come on, Tom,
to have it right there.
Yeah, there we go.
The 49ers Rush Podcast.